Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a review for a expansion to one of our favorite games from last year. This one is called Underwater Cities New Discoveries. It's the brand new addition to Underwater Cities from Vladimir Suchi.
Yeah, he made another one of our favorites, Pulsar 2849. Underwater Cities is one of our favorites from last year. We were really looking forward to this expansion, and it adds a lot of interesting things, and it really does a fair amount to change the game a bit.
All right, so we're not going to explain how to play the game. We've already done a review of the game, which has all that information, which we'll put in the descriptor below. What we are going to explain today are the new elements that have been added to Underwater Cities, as well as give you our take on whether or not this is a worthy addition to the series. So the first thing that you're going to notice is there are 44 brand new cards that are interjected into Era 1, Era 2, and Era 3 deck. Now, all of these cards have brand new effects as well. So you're going to be having abilities that you didn't have in the original game. Plus, you're going to have 8 new cards that are interjected into the level 1 through 3 and the level 3 special decks as well.
Yeah, if you thought you had a good time looking through your hand every time you got a new card last time, now there's even more of a variety. And what's interesting is it dilutes in a good way those decks so that it makes some of the strategies and elements from the original game a little more challenging to come by.
The second thing that you're going to notice are the Quickstart Tiles. There are 6 of these tiles, and you're going to use X number plus 1 equal to the number of players. So if you have a 3-player game set up as we do now, you're going to use 4 of these tiles. These tiles look like this. And in reverse turn order at the very start of the game, each player is going to draft one of these tiles if you decide to use the Quickstart Rules. Now, the Quickstart Rules can be used in the base game, with the expansion, the museum, and plus the other 2 modules in the game. So it can be used with any of them. Each of these Quickstart tiles does a couple things. One, it's going to add some elements to your board and some resources to start the game that you normally wouldn't have. You're no longer going to get your normal one of each of the resources in the game and credits. You're going to use this for your starting thing. It's also going to push you up 1 round. So instead of playing 10 rounds in the game, you're only going to play 9 rounds because you're going to start the game on round 2.
Yeah, starting on round 2 is probably something that sounds pretty attractive to everybody. Even if you love the original game like we do, it can go a little bit long, so starting on round 2 is a nice addition there. Another thing, our new assistant cards. If there's one sort of complaint that I've heard from about the first one after you've played it a few times, is those assistants are a little samey. You know, there's a little bit of a difference, but not much. There's a missed opportunity there that they've remedied with these new assistants. Each player is going to get 2 of these at the beginning of the game, and these assistants have significantly different powers when you use them as an action, but all of them also have either an immediate thing that happens as soon as you take it at the beginning of the game, or potentially an ongoing effect that really gives those assistants a lot of flavor.
Now, there's 3 additional ways that you can play the game. One of those is called the Metropolis Race. Now, instead of starting with all of your metropolises already pre-built on your board, there are now green metropolises that you can actually acquire. These are going to be placed face up to the side of the board, and as players build their structures, they're actually racing to acquire these by building tunnels to those locations on the board. Those locations will open up the ability to grab those and place them in, so players can kind of tailor their strategy according to the metropolises that are available.
Yeah, while that one adds a bit of a race element to trying to get the metropolis that you want on your board, there's another one called Metropolis Choice. Everyone's going to get one of these boards. This works specifically with some of the boards that come in the new expansion. And down here in this corner, you're going to see a number of all of the different colored Metropolis tiles you can take. You're going to get potentially a brown, green, and blue, and those are color-coded to the spaces they go on the board. You're going to get exactly what's down here in this corner, and then you're able to choose at the beginning of the game which ones you want and place them accordingly.
Now, before we get into the final and big expansion within the game, let's talk about what you just saw there. There are going to be 8 new boards in this game, and these boards are double-sided, and they're layered, meaning that no longer are things going to shift and move. Everything's going to lock down in these boards, and that's something people have been asking for quite some time. The other important thing is these boards serve a number of different purposes. You're going to be using boards 1 through 4 with one of the different standard games. You're going to be using 5 through 8 for the Metropolis Race, and so forth. So you're going to be using very specific sides of these boards for very specific modules within the game. And that last module, which we actually have set up in front of you right here, is called the Museum module. And this is the big expansion within the game itself. The first thing you're going to notice is this sideboard here. And this board is actually double-sided as well. So you can play on the A side or you can play on the B side. Now this is all about exploration because on every player's board, you're going to see a number of different discovery tiles that are placed face down randomly in very specific locations on your board. As you build either tunnels or cities or buildings in these locations, they're going to unlock these tiles, and as you unlock them, you're going to flip them over. Do whatever it says on that tile. In this case, I have the ability to draw 2 cards, and then you're going to place it in one of these locations. These are broken into 5 different locations to represent your 5 different discovery tiles. You have location 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have to place them in that order. So the first one's going to allow me to draw 2 cards, while as you place further ones in the game, you're opening up new abilities, possibly getting new cards, and new scoring mechanisms within the game.
Yeah, the museum module adds yet another sort of race element to the game. It doesn't make the game a race game, but just like these government contracts in the original game, along with the potential race for the Metropolises, this museum board makes you think about your decisions, because if you're going to get there first, if your opponent's going to get there first, am I going to get the Metropolis I want? It adds a lot throughout the entire game.
Now, the one final thing the game does add is a number of additional building tokens. If you're familiar and you played Underwater Cities as many times as we have, you have ran out of those. They have added 10 for each of the different colored buildings, so now you have a supply that's going to be able to cover all your building structures throughout the game. So that is Underwater Cities. Let's actually talk about our feelings about the game. Now, I'll start because I actually put a post on BGG a while ago about my disdain for the kelp strategy within the game, because at the time I felt kelp was super powerful, especially with a combination of the right types of cards. Kelp is the only inherent structure that's going to give you victory points when it's built in a very specific way on your player board. So I was able to do that against numerous different people, numerous different times. And I got backlash for it, obviously, because people felt that it wasn't the only way to win. Having played this expansion, I don't feel that's the case anymore. There are enough new cards in the game, enough new ways to score, that it's kind of diluted that down a little bit. You can still go heavy kelp, you can still get the right combination of cards, but this is really a game about the people that you're playing, how well they draft, how well they build, how well they block you from getting the cards that you want to get. If they see you're going a very specific strategy, there are many opportunities in this game for other players to indirectly prevent you from doing that specific strategy. And I feel like this expansion's added enough dilution to that where it's not going to be inherent every time that you play the game.
Yeah, similar to the original game, this game just emphasizes you've got to find that and maximize those strategies for scoring as many points as you want, while at the same time, like any good game, trying to negatively affect all the other players at the table. And that's the key here, is taking a look and making sure you know what all the other players are up to. In one of our plays of this game with this expansion, Jeremy still won soundly, but with a completely different strategy, and one that's very possible in the original game. But like we said earlier, depending on how many cards come out now that there's so many cards in each of these decks, it might affect your ability to get what you want going, especially down even here with those kelp cards that might be just that much further down in this deck. They may not come up, so it's a little harder to maybe find those strategies. But you used the strategy where you just had a variety of things around all of your cities and scored more points than you ever have, I think.
Yeah, it was a very different experience for me. The other thing that I'll say, I got a bunch of positives. One of the other ones I'll say is the variability that this is interjected into the game. You can now play the game in 4 different ways: the standard version, the Metropolis Race, the Metropolis Choice, and the Museum, all providing a wide amount of variety. You have a bunch of new cards, which are going to add to that variety. The museum board is double-sided, which again is going to add to that variety. Your museum discovery tiles are going to change the way that you build the game, which again is going to add to the variety. There's just a lot of different variety, not to mention those assistants.
Yeah, the assistants for me, it probably is the cherry on top of that variety ice cream sundae, because these things add so much flavor to the game that it just didn't have before. The kind of powers these things have throughout the entire game, someone's going to be using their power a third, 2/3, almost to the end of the game, and you're going to still be going, wait a minute, what are you doing again over there? Like, I had a power that allowed me to go up an extra space every time I used this space, so I was going up 3 on the turn order track. I played the base game a number of times, and this one now had some of the most interesting scoring and some of the most different routes that people have taken on this board, because there are some tried and true spots on this board, if you've played the base game, that in most games are contested, especially late game. When you're trying to upgrade your buildings, this spot right here is probably one of the most go-to spots. But in our games with the expansion, that wasn't so much the case. I was going there,
Right.
but you didn't go there because you were really going for that variety more than stacking up throughout the game.
Not only the variety, but the cards they interjected provided more opportunity to do spots that you typically don't go to and enact those abilities. For instance, one of the abilities I have was every time you go to this location, which is the one that you can go to many times, I could trigger off more abilities with those new cards. So sometimes I would just be discarding cards, taking the action of that card and getting some resources from doing it, which you would typically never do in the base game itself.
Yeah, the engine building here, we haven't really discussed specifically the cards that are in these decks, but one of the general things that a lot of these cards do are enhance all of these different spots. Like Jeremy just said, he had some cards that enhance this spot, which generally speaking is a last resort spot that you'd want to go to, but for him it was very attractive. I had a spot here that if whenever I went here and activated the spot, I also got a victory point. So it allowed you to build up a little bit more of an engine that guided you through the game, kind of directing you to do what you wanted to do.
So I've got 3 negatives. The first one is the length of the game. Now this is completely determined by your player group, but this is a long game, even at 2 players. This is 40 to 45 minutes per player. So for a 3-player game, which we just recently played, that was about 2.5 hours.
2.5.
It was a long game, and just know that's what you're getting into. However, if I'm going to play a 2 to 2.5 hour game, I prefer this over Terraforming Mars because of the structure of the game. They have similar vibes to them, but the engine in this game is quicker, it's faster, your actions seem to be more in tune. There's not much of a longer, drawn-out strategy. Everything is concise in what you're trying to do, but it's going to be a long game.
Yeah, I would say too, comparing it to Terraforming Mars, one of the things this game has that that one doesn't as much is that sort of tension with, is someone going to take that space? Is someone going to take that space? Because you're sitting there wondering what you're going to be able to achieve on your turn, and that kind of plays into that length of game, because as soon as someone takes that space, then you've got a player at the table, myself included, rethinking completely what they're going to do on their turn right when it becomes their turn, because what they were planning on, they were so focused on, they hadn't thought about anything else. Last thing I'll say about the length of the game, it does take a long time, but just like with the base game, it doesn't feel like a long time.
Right.
You know, that 2.5 hours is gone, and you look at the clock and you're like, wow, that took 2.5 hours, but it didn't really feel like 2.5 hours.
Because everything you do is super satisfying. Yeah. The other 2 things are about the quality. The game is beautiful, the artwork's beautiful, everything they've done with this, including these player boards, is incredible. However, there is some bowing in these boards, not only with the bowing of the board himself, but a lot of these spaces have chipboard between them, and they bow. And sometimes when you bow, the pieces can pop out. And that may be just with the first production run, but the other more serious thing is the back of the cards. I have here, and you probably can't see this, but I have a 1 from the first game and then 1 from the expansion. And the purples don't match up, the browns don't quite match up, and the Era 2 super purples don't match up. So you can see the cards that are coming. You might want to sleeve them with black cards on the back, which then you wouldn't be able to see what era they're from, but it could be an issue for some people.
Yeah, I mean, the saving grace there is there's so many dang cards that it would really be hard for that to become an advantage, but it is something we noticed while we were playing. The colors are distinctly different.
So that is Underwater Cities, New Discoveries. I 100% suggest getting this. This is a worthy expansion for the series. Adds just enough variability and variety to the game to make it something that's going to stay on your shelf for a long time. Plus, there's new ways to play the game, which is always good. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.